saying there are children with very special needs cases, mild to severe, and there's a non-public school that is assigned. I mean, that has been made for them.
Right.
But these are different from private schools. So
They're different from private schools because private schools they're just that. They're private. They're not funded by the state. They're for profit. And private schools under federal law are taken out of they don't have the responsibilities to provide services or even, any specific accommodations. Religious schools, for example, don't even have to provide accommodations for kids with disabilities.
okay.
So usually, if we're looking at if a parent wants to place a kid in a private school, I usually say let's go over to the non-public sector, not the private school, because the private school kids will just get kicked out often.
Oh, if they can't handle the case.
Yeah, if they can't handle the kid. I mean, the parents will be lucky to get the kid in. What's attractive to parents about private schools is they're usually really small.
Yeah.
Right, so they have small class sizes and theoretically they can be more individualized, but a lot of private schools they don't have any special training, they don't know how to deal with kids with, they don't know how to teach a kid with dyslexia, for example, or they don't know how to respond to a child with ADHD who's acting out. So
shouldn't they be more equipped to do that, because they're taking such a big fees? Then shouldn't they be having a section within the school for these children?
Theoretically, yes, but since they're private, they're for profit. I mean, they can do whatever they want. It's like a business, right? So, so when we talk about shouldn't they, and I would start looking at the public schools, where I'd say shouldn't they have specialized, and they're required to by law, but most of them don't. So you and I had previously talked about what's called a least restrictive environment, LRE, and school districts are required to keep kids within the least restrictive environment. So that means with typically developing peers, children with disabilities have a right to be with typically developing peers as much as possible. And for kids like with autism, it's vital to be around typically developing peers. They use them as peer models, right? So it's impossible for a child with autism to learn how to act appropriately socially without having those peer models to see it.
Oh, I see. So you fight cases where children with autism, for example, can be a part of the environment, or
I mean, it goes both ways.
Balance.
So for example, one case I have in a nearby district, it's a little boy he's in 4th grade, and he's autistic, and he's nonverbal for the most part. He can't talk that much, but he's very, very smart. He's one of these kids that, his mom brings in a 600 little piece Lego set and sets it on the desk, and by the end of our meeting, 20 minutes later, he's built like this incredible, he's gifted in one way, but he's nonverbal, and he has pretty severe behaviors.
I see.
So he screams and he kicks and he punches, he gets frustrated really easily. So the school district has him in a classroom for severely handicapped kids. So you can imagine, right, so it's kids that have intellectual disabilities, that have severe autism, that aren't, they're not on an academic track at all. And this kid has a lot of skills, he's behind definitely a couple grade levels in math and reading. I mean, it's hard for him. But mom feels like he should be in the mainstream more and be able to be with his typically developing peers more, because he is very bright in certain ways. So in that case, I'm fighting to have an ABA trained aide, which is applied behavioral analysis, somebody that's trained in dealing with kids that have these behaviors, to be with him all the time so that he can actually be in the mainstream class.
Right. So he should be like a shadow for him. But
someone
who's certified.
Someone who's certified, right. So a lot of times when parents ask for an aide, they get somebody who is getting minimum wage. Right, who has never dealt with a child with disabilities, who is basically just a shadow, who doesn't really know how to respond when, the child is acting inappropriately, and they don't. So a lot of times what I'm fighting for is an aide that's trained, in some sort of behavioral techniques,
Right.
that knows how to de-escalate the situation, that knows how to help kids interact, socially, that knows when to fade back,
Yeah.
when they shouldn't be there. So
Okay.
training.
So then these non-profit, no, the
Non-public?
the non-public schools, they don't have them in the school. These trained, ABA trained
So
professionals.
there's a school called ANOVA.
Okay.
It's actually, there's one in the North Bay and one in Concord. And ANOVA is a school for kids with high functioning autism.
Okay.
So very bright kids,
Yeah.
but that are, disabled socially and, have a really hard time in the public school setting. So they have these really small classes. They have aides embedded in the program that are ABA trained. So it's just constant behavioral and social interventions embedded in the program. Places like ANOVA actually do have aides that get contracted by the school districts to go into public schools.
Okay.
But it's really expensive. So to send a kid to ANOVA is somewhere around, I think, $50,000 a year.
50,000. Wow.
It's very expensive, right? To get an aide, and if you think about a full-time trained behavioral aide, those aides, this is their job, their full-time job, right? So in order to make a living in the Bay Area, that they have to be making at least $50,000, right?
Yeah.
So to get an aide is probably right around the same amount of money as it is to send the child to the school.
Yes, of course. It's better to just have that aide and have a personal.
Yeah, so I mean, it just depends on the kid as to what's better. I mean, so I am always, kind of my moral and ethical where I stand in mainstreaming, like I'm always for the LRE, I'm very dedicated to the least restrictive environment. For clients, that's always the first place that I go, but for some kids it's just not possible.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Also.
It doesn't work. I mean, especially, if we look at a big, huge public school like the high schools in Oakland.
Yeah.
No matter what services, if you have a kid that is severely anxious and, severe social anxiety and suicidal and depressed and gets overwhelmed very easy.
Yeah.
No matter what services we give that kid, especially a high schooler, you can't have like a therapeutic aide following a high schooler around, right? It's embarrassing, it causes bullying, it's stigmatizing.
Of course.
So sometimes there's just no public, nothing you could do to make a public school placement work for a kid.
Okay.
And that's when we start looking for non-public, it's when the public school, when all of our resources are exhausted. We've tried counseling, we've tried aides, we've tried tutoring, depending on the disability. We want to try everything we can in the public school setting before we're pulling a kid out to a non-public school.
Sure. So that's when the parents are quite done with trying everything else, and then so that's when they approach you, and then you help them to get that infrastructure going.
Yeah, usually, and parents come to me usually after they've tried everything else. Most parents don't hire an attorney straight off the bat. A lot of parents come to me after years of fighting with the school over the program, over the services, over trying to get their kid what they need.
Yeah, can imagine.
Yeah, so by the time they get to me, they're usually done. They've tried everything they can.
And then when you have these cases, when you are fighting these cases, I mean, who are the people who, do you have another team of people who are higher up than you who will support you, or is it just you alone and you lawyers alone, the ones who handle these cases?
Yeah, I mean it is. So I mean when I get a case set up, I mean I get experts involved, right? So I get neuropsychological assessments so that I have a neuropsych that is ready to support what these parents want. I get a bunch of different assessments by people that are on our side. Because the school district, their assessments of the kids will always say exactly what they want for the child, right? So that's part of the case, is kind of building a team of people, because a judge, at the end of the day, if I'm looking at a trial, a judge isn't going to trust my opinion as to what this child needs, and a judge isn't going to trust a parent's opinion as to what a kid needs educationally. So we have to get a lot of experts involved in the case too.
Right, so that's what you do. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so parents are entitled to independent assessments if they don't agree with the district's assessment under the
right.
law.
Okay.
So the school district will, if a parent can say, I don't agree with this assessment for one reason or another, it's not comprehensive or appropriate, so I want an independent assessment. Independent assessments run $5,000-$10,000, so they're expensive.
Right. Yeah.
They're very expensive. I mean, all of this is expensive. You know, that's why school districts fight so hard. It becomes a money issue.
Yeah.
So school districts can fight it in court. They can fight and say that their assessment was appropriate, or they can just pay.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they end up paying for the assessment.
For the assessment. Naturally, because it's their child, they're going to do it. They're going to have to do it. They don't have to.
Right. Well,
Choice.
but the school districts will end up paying too, because in order to not pay, they're going to have to fight it in court, which to fight it in court would be just as expensive as paying for the assessment, right? So, so there's ways to get around, you know, there's ways to get the school to fund these independent assessments.
Okay.
And then, you know, we kind of get a team of experts on our side, you
to
know,
support this whole thing.
to support the parents and support the child. I mean, that's not to say that experts don't sometimes say, you know, to a parent, like, you're way off base here. Your kid doesn't need, you know, the non-public school that you think your kid needs. Like, your kid would be better off if you had an aide come in, or if you had specialized teachers, or if you had, so, I mean, it's not like we're paying an expert to tell us what we want to hear. They come in and they do a full assessment, but they're independent of the school district. And I was saying that the next part after resource is a special day class, and that's where kids are put in the public school system into special classes.
Okay.
There's mild mods, kids with mild to moderate disability classes, and there's severely handicapped classes, and theoretically these classes, the problem again with these classes is that, you know, it's like a box. And not all kids are going to fit into these boxes, so I have a lot of parents fighting to get kids out of these special day classes. But anyway, with the least restrictive environment, so we have resource, then we have special day class, then we have non-public schools, then we have in-state residential schools.
Okay.
So in-state residential schools are schools where kids are going to live, because there's something that's preventing them from getting an education, such as mental health issues, right, where they need a full-time therapeutic support in order to go to school.
So and they live there.
They live there and they go to school, so they have round-the-clock therapy. You know, they have like group therapy. I mean, depending on the kid, depending on the school, it depends on what services they're getting. Once we are done with out-of-state residentials, then we start looking at out-of-state residentials. And that's considered the most restrictive environment, is an out-of-state residential treatment facility. Utah, the state of Utah has made this business in residential schools. So that is where, I don't know, 85% of the RTCs are. And the reason is because Utah has a state law that they allow locked facilities. So level 14, there's levels of residential. And a level 14 residential is a secure facility where a kid can't run away. So California doesn't allow locked facilities, Utah does. So we're sending a lot of our kids to Utah for treatment.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I have a lot of cases like that where kids, you know, if they're being hospitalized multiple times because they're suicidal, or in one case homicidal, you know, he's threatening to kill people in his family, people around him, that needs intensive treatment, we're looking at a residential school in Utah. And again, the schools are fighting these hard because we're looking at $10,000 to $12,000 a month for these educational placements. So it's very expensive. Yeah. I mean, you know, over $100,000 a year for a kid to go to school.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Let me check that. Thought it went off again.
Did it turn off again?
No, it's on.
Okay.
Okay, so the California doesn't allow that locked law. So that's obviously a good thing to have. In India, we have that.
You do?
Yeah, there are institutions where they're not allowed to leave the facilities and stuff like that. Because the severe cases, you can't have them roaming around and going home. So.
Right. And are they schools in India, or is it more like a mental health facility?
Private mental health facilities.
Okay.
Those are private.
Okay.
But just to know that they're Schools, no. The schools, nothing is being done. Schools is
Okay.
just open-ended. They're normal schools. Nobody, the government is not there to protect anybody who has an issue, a family who has an issue. I've never heard of an attorney fighting for schools. I've heard of children's rights organizations,
Right.
but there isn't an attorney. But then they have a voice because the masses have a voice in it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
they yell, they scream, they get their things done.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
there's no law. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
We need a law.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the difference too of like of what you're talking about. So, like we have mental health hospitals too, right? Psychiatric facilities, and that's considered medical, not
That's
educational.
not educational.
But there is a big fight between what is medical and what's educational because again, we're looking for funding, right? Medical insurance is going to be paying for,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And educational, the school districts are going to be paying for.
Why not? Yeah, but then why
So-
doesn't everybody be entitled to that
Right.
education funding?
Well, yeah, I mean, that in this state they are, you know, in this state.
Okay.
But in this state, the battle becomes the school district will say, well, that's a medical issue.
Oh.
And like, for example, I had a girl with severe anorexia and bulimia, right? She, and she's suicidal. She's constantly trying to kill herself, you know, engaging in self-harm, extremely depressed.
my.
But she's also has this intense eating disorder.
Mhm.
So she was medically unstable a lot because she's not consuming enough food. So she
Oh.
had to go into a specialized kind of hospital setting where they could monitor her health all the time, but she would
Yeah.
also get education. She needed to go to school, and this particular place was a residential that had a school and inside of it, but it was also a hospital.
Wow.
So the fight became whether it was medical and insurance should pay for it, or whether it was educational and the school district should pay for it. And the insurance company said, we're not paying for that. And
Oh.
the school said, we're not paying for that.
Why? I mean, I thought there
Because
was.
it's money. You
Yeah.
know?
This whole thing goes around with money at the end.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow.
So in the end, in that case, the school ended up paying for a portion of it. You know, we got
Okay.
some of the money back. And again, we're looking at, you know, in that particular case, I think we were looking at $120,000 that the parents had to pay. So we were trying to get some of that money back for them, you know.
Wow. Oh, that case is still going on.
No, that case is done. Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different kinds of cases, a lot
Yeah.
of different kinds of disorders and disabilities, and the lines get blurred as to,
Yeah.
you know, what you're fighting for and whether it's medical, whether it's educational, especially with the